إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فإن أحسن الكلام كلام الله وخير الهدى هدى محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وإن شر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. Today we start the eighth Naqd, the eighth nullifier of Islam, and the text is as follows: Al-Naqd al-Thamin, the eighth nullifier of Islam, مظاهرة المشركين ومعاونتهم على المسلمين. والدليل قوله تعالى ومن يتولهم منكم فإنه منهم إن الله لا يهدي القوم الظالمين. To aid and to support the mushrikeen, to aid them and to support them over and against the Muslimin. And the evidence is the statement of Allah the Most High: whoever turns to them, وَمَنْ يَتَوَلَّهُمْ مِنْكُمْ فَإِنَّهُ مِنْهُمْ. Whoever from amongst you turns to them, then indeed he is from them. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَهْدِي الْقَوْمَ الظَّالِمِينَ. Indeed, Allah does not guide a wrongdoing people. So regarding this, first of all, what is said by Shaykh Muhammad bin Abd rahimahullah in his sharh, and he says that al-mudahara, this mudahara that we are speaking of the mushrikeen, this is to strengthen them with weapons, for example, or with opinion, with ra'i, or with any kind of cooperation, and to aid and support them against the Muslimin. So these actions, all of these actions are disbelief. Why are they disbelief? The Shaykh explains, because behind these actions there is wala and mahabba. So these actions on the outside, they point to a type of love that a person must be having and loyalty that a person must be showing. Otherwise they wouldn't be doing these actions. And that's why the Shaykh then mentions the ayah, وَمَنْ يَتَوَلَّهُمْ مِنْكُمْ فَإِنَّهُ مِنْهُمْ. Whoever amongst you, he turns to them, meaning he turns to them, he supports them, he aids them, then indeed he is from among them. Indeed, Allah does not guide a people who are oppressors, ظالمين. So the Shaykh says this ayah, what it is speaking about is al-muwalat and al-mahabba. So this is to basically show the loyalty of the heart and the love of the heart to the likes of those people. And this mudahara, the outward mudahara, so when you support them with weapons, when you support them with your opinion, right? This is, it's from the athar, the Shaykh says, it's from the effects of something that's already there in the heart, which is the loyalty, the love, and that is what necessitates disbelief. So the Shaykh says that this topic here of al-muwalat, al-muhabba, is different to at-ta'amul, right? At-ta'amul is interaction, and this thing that we are speaking about is something different. Al-mudahara, al-muwalat, all of this is aiding, supporting, loving them, showing loyalty to them. But at-ta'amul, al-mu'amala, is something different. The mu'amala with disbelievers and mudahara are two different things. There's a big difference, the Shaykh says. He says, التعامل معهم في البيع والشراء, to interact with them in buying, selling, in taking loans, in giving loans, in taking loans, and benefiting from their industry and even weapons that they manufacture. And all of this, the Shaykh says, هذا أمر جائز وكان واقعا في عهد النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. This used to take place in the time of the Prophet himself. So he says, in Medina, there were different types of disbelievers, Kufar, there were Yahud, there were Munafiqeen, and in that society, the Muslims, they obviously, on account of the religion, there was opposition in account of the religion. But in terms of the dunya, then the Muslims would interact with them, they would sell to them, buy from them, give them loans, take loans from them. And even the Prophet ﷺ, when he died whilst he had a shield that for which he'd mortgaged from a Yahudi. Now his shield, he was in debt to a Yahudi because it was on mortgage. And or there was some food involved in relation to that shield. So the Shaykh says that it's important to mention this so that people don't confuse between at-ta'amul and al-mudahara, because al-mudahara is something which has, he says, al-muwalat wal-muhabba wal-ridha. All of these things show the pleasure of the heart with, the disbelievers and what they are upon. Whereas at-ta'amul is just interaction which is dini. And to deal with them as individuals, this does not mean that you now love them for the sake of their religion. This is totally separate. And the Shaykh says here, he also makes another point. He says that I mentioned factories, al-masani'. And these factories that you see today, and the Shaykh is referring to the factories that you see in the non-Muslim countries which manufacture tanks, for example, which manufacture ammunition, for example, rifles, guns, all of these things, fighter planes. The Shaykh says that these things that are present today are simply an extension of what used to be present in the time of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So things haven't changed. Things are the same. It's exactly the same. But it's just the form has changed slightly. The Shaykh says, unfortunately, this is because the Muslims have not advanced in learning industry, in developing industry, and that's why they have to rely upon those besides them. But the point the Shaykh is making is that they are forced to do this, and so the situation that we have today is the same as the situation in the city of Medina. Because in the city of Medina and the surrounding areas, there used to be places where the Muslims, the Sahaba, they would go, and it would be, certain industries like, for example, making swords, making daggers, making jewelry, gold jewelry for the women. All these things, these were in the hands of the Yahud. Right? So the Muslims would go to them, they would sit down, and they would watch, the haddad, the ironmonger to make the sword, or to make the jewelry, or whatever else it was. And so the Shaykh is saying there's no difference between that situation there and the situation today in our time. And so we benefit from the people who specialize in these types of industry and these types of knowledge, and we use their services. But at the same time, we do not have any inward loyalty, inward love, inward type of affection, because this then is the other type, which is the mulahara. So this is all the Shaykh really says. He says, in summary, this Naqd is that anyone who aids the Kufar against the Muslimin, mukhtaran, out of choice, willfully, without being forced or compelled, then this person, he is upon disbelief. Or if he loves them for their religion, right? So he doesn't aid them, but he just, in his heart, there's love for their religion, right? But he doesn't aid them. To love them for their religion, this is disbelief, whether he supports them or not, right? So these are two situations. And then the Shaykh says, if he supports them out of choice, but he still, he doesn't agree with their deed, he hates their deen, and then he supports them, then this is a great major sin. It is a major sin. ذنب كبير ومعصية عظيمة. But it does not reach the issue of disbelief. Inshallah, we'll talk about this in a bit more detail when we come to some of the other explanations. So that's Shaykh Muhammad Aman, it's very brief. And so next we move to what Shaykh Ubaid Hafizahullah has said. And so he begins by saying, this Naqd, its meaning is wadih, its meaning is clear. It is to aid and support the mushrikeen or the kuffar which means to aid them against the Muslimin. And والمقصود أن هذا المسلم صار ظهيرا أو ظهرا حربا للمسلمين لنصرة الكفار. So basically he says the meaning is that this Muslim, he becomes a dhahir. He becomes now someone who is one who aids them, or he becomes the backbone, he becomes one who supports them, and in making war against the Muslimin in order to aid the disbelievers. Shaykh says that the Shaykh rahimahullah, he used the verse in the ayah of al-Ma'idah in order to provide proof, and the Shaykh says we are going to comment upon this ayah. So the ayah, the full ayah, the verse which was quoted, the full ayah is Surah Al-Ma'idah verse 551. يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تتخذوا اليهود والنصارى أولياء بعضهم أولياء بعض ومن يتولهم منكم فإنه منهم إن الله لا يهدي القوم الظالمين. O you who believe, do not take the Yahud and the Nasara as awliya, as close friends, allies and protectors. They are only allies one to another. And whoever amongst you turns to them, then indeed he is from among them. Indeed, Allah does not guide the wrongdoers. So the Shaykh says there are 3 or 4 parts in this ayah. The first part, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu. So the Shaykh says, first of all, this is speaking to believers. Whenever we hear in the Quran, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, then there are certain wisdoms, there are certain hikam behind this statement. And the Shaykh mentions 3. The first of them is that the people who are being spoken to, when Allah Azza wa Jalla, He says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, they are the people who are going to take benefit from this verse. They are the people of al-intifa', the one who are going to take benefit. He quotes from Ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, إِذَا سَمِعْتَ يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا فِي الْقُرْآنِ فَأَسْغِ لَهَا سَمْعَكَ فَإِمَّا خَيْرٌ تُؤْمَرْ بِهِ وَإِمَّا شَرٌ تُنْهَى عَنْهُ. So when you hear this statement in the Quran, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, then give it your ear, pay attention to it, because either it is goodness that you are going to be commanded, or it is evil that you are going to be prohibited from. So this is the first benefit that we take from the first part of this ayah, that the believer, when he hears this khitab in the Quran, he's expecting some benefit, either a commandment or a prohibition which is going to benefit him. Second thing this indicates is that the people of Iman who are quickest in responding to Allah, His Messenger, and the quickest in complying to the judgment of Allah, judgment of the Messenger, then you find that these people are the people whose hearts are mutma'innah. They are calm, they are at peace, and their chests are open. Their chests are open, ready to receive whatever commands Allah and His Messenger are going to give. Why is this? It is because they have full conviction that this is huda and nur, which is coming from Allah Azza wa Jal, and that's why these people, they benefit from this. The third fa'idah the Shaykh mentions is that the believers who hear this speech, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, they are very, very eager for their iman. So they want their iman to be protected. They want to keep it away from anything which is going to harm their iman, either to reduce it or to remove it altogether. So this is the first part of the ayah, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu. Secondly, in the verse, Allah Azza wa Jal, He prohibited from taking the Yahud and the Nasara, from showing mahabba to them, and nusra and taqreeb, becoming close to them and aiding and supporting, and without a person distinguishing between a mu'min and other than him, right? He treats them all to be the same, right? So he says, لا تتخذوا اليهود والنصارى أولياء. Do not take them as friends and protectors. Then the third part of the verse, in the third part of the verse, he says, بعضهم أولياء بعض. So in reality, these people are united upon their enmity towards the people of Iman. And sometimes, even when they be nice and they display niceness, it is only in your face, it is only outwardly. But in reality, وَإِنْ كَانُوا فِي الْخَافِ وَالْبَاطِنِ وَمَغَابَ عَنِ الْأَنْذَارِ, he says, behind the scenes, you see that they have enmity and they have dislike behind the scenes. And this is what Allah Azza wa Jalla, He says in the Quran, وَقَالَتِ الْيَهُودُ لَيْسَتِ النَّصَارَى عَلَى شَيْءٍ وَقَالَتِ النَّصَارَى لَيْسَتِ الْيَهُودُ عَلَى شَيْءٍ. Even between each other, they will say, well, the Jews are upon nothing. The Jews will say the Christians are upon nothing, right? And they have this between themselves. And likewise, they when it comes to the Muslimin, they come together and they have this, hatred and enmity. And that for that reason, Allah Azza wa Jal, He said to His Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, وَلَئِنِ اتَّبَعْتَ أَهْوَاءَهُمْ مِنْ بَعْدِ مَا جَاءَكَ مِنَ الْعِلْمِ إِنَّكَ إِذًا لَمِنَ الظَّالِمِينَ. That if you were to follow their desires after knowledge came to you, then you would be from the ظالمين. Now we know the Shaykh says that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he's ma'soom from major sin and kufr. But he says, why did Allah Azza wa Jal, why did He mention this to the Messenger of Allah? Why did He say to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, إِنَّكَ إِذًا لَمِنَ الظَّالِمِينَ, that if you did this, you would be from the ظالمين? And the reason is because the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he is the one who is taking the message to the ummah. He's the one who is conveying the message. And the one who is conveying the message, he is the Imam, he is the Muballigh, he's the one who conveys. And so this, because he's the one who's facing the Yahud and the Nasara and other than them, then the command is given to him by way of example, that the one who is the greatest leader, that he is the one who should be careful and take caution from those people and not to incline towards them. Why? Because those people are upon whatever they are upon. So then, point number 4, in the last part of the verse, Allah Azza wa Jalla, He says, وَمَن يَتَوَلَّهُمْ وَمَن يَتَوَلَّهُمْ. This now is the 4th point. This means the one who takes them as awliya with al-nusra and al-mahabba. And this person is in reality counted to be from among them. And so we need to understand here that there are the scholars, they distinguish between two things. The scholars say there is at-tawalli and there is al-muwalat. These are two different things. At-tawalli, which is what this verse is mentioning, is when you completely turn to them and you support them and you aid them and you show love to them for their deen and what they are upon of kufr and disbelief. And upon that, you then support them against the Muslimin. Right? So this is to turn to them from every angle. This is pure, it's kufr, it's disbelief, it's irtidad, apostasy. And then there is al-muwalat, and they say this here basically is just to show outward loyalty to them. And this outward loyalty, it can be either for a reason or for no reason. A reason could be that you fear some harm from them. You fear some harm from them. There's a verse that comes to this, we'll come to that later on. So you fear some harm, and so you just basically make some mudarat, you just make some diplomacy and you behave with them in a way to ward off their evil. This now is permissible in the Sharia. It's permissible, right? But if you make loyalty for no justifiable reason, and it's for a worldly benefit or gain, and you have some love to them, but it's for a dunyawi reason, this now is prohibited. So this tafsir, we will come to it inshallah a bit later. But the point here, that in this verse it mentions وَمَن يَتَوَلَّهُمْ, the one who makes tawalli, the one who turns to them completely from every angle, with his heart, with his love, with his loyalty, with his wealth and with his whatever else. This then is clear disbelief. Any person who falls into this, فَإِنَّهُ مِنْهُمْ, the Shaykh says, he is from them. وَإِن تَظَاهَرَ بِالْإِسْلَامِ وَإِن صَلَّى وَسَامَ وَزَكَّى وَحَجَّ وَزَعَمَ أَنَّهُ مُسْلِمٌ هُوَ مِنْهُمْ وَلَا كَرَامَةَ عَيْنٍ. Even if he displays Islam, prays, fasts, gives charity, makes hajj, claims he's a Muslim, he is from among them. So then at the end of the ayah, Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, Inna Allah la yahdi al-qawm al-zalimeen. So now He negated al-hidayah from the zalimin. And who are the zalimin? They are those people who are pleased with kufr after iman. They are pleased with disbelief after iman. And they love blindness to guidance and falsehood to truth. So in other words, the hujjah is established upon them. The proof is known and established. So therefore they become zalimin. So the Shaykh says that when Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, Inna Allah la yahdi al-qawm al-zalimin, the hidayah, which hidayah is He negating from them? Because hidayah is of two types. Hidayah of al-irshad, wal-dilala. This is when He shows people the actual path, that this is what the path is. And then there is the guidance of at-tawfiq wal-qabul. This is when a person, he accepts and he's given guidance to accept the truth. This is what Allah is negating here, not the first one. Because the zalimeen, they already know the truth. They know the truth. They've been shown the truth. And they've rejected the truth. Okay, so the guidance that Allah is negating here is not the first type. It is the second type, which is the hidayah, where He actually guides a person to accept and submit to the truth. So the Shaykh says this is one ayah which is a proof for this point. There are many verses in the Quran which are similar, and the Shaykh goes on to mention a few of them. So we'll go through them inshallah ta'ala. The first of them is the statement of Allah Azza wa Jal, in which He says, وَلَن تَرْضَى عَنْكَ الْيَهُودُ وَلَن نَّصَارَى حَتَّى تَتَّبِعَ مِلَّتَهُمْ قُلْ إِنَّ هُدَى اللَّهِ هُوَ الْهُدَى وَلَئِنِ اتَّبَعْتَ أَهْوَاءَهُمْ بَعْدَ الَّذِي جَاءَكَ مِنَ الْعِلْمِ مَا لَكَ مِنَ اللَّهِ مِنْ وَلِيٍّ وَلَا نَصِيرٍ. This ayah is similar to the one before. Never will the Yahud and the Nasara be pleased with you until you follow their religion. Say, indeed the guidance is the guidance of Allah. And if you were to follow their desires after knowledge came to you, then you will not have any aider nor helper from Allah. So here the Shaykh says, this ayah is a refutation of the people of the du'at of at-taqrib, the ones who are calling for nearness, togetherness between Yahud and Nasara, Diyanat, the various other religions. He says that this is a refutation of these people. They're trying to make everyone to be equal. A person of Tawheed to be equal to a person, of all these different Diyanat. And the Shaykh says, وَلَن تَرْضَى عَنْكَ الْيَهُودُ وَلَن نَّصَارَى حَتَّى تَتَّبِعَ مِلَّتَهُم. What is their aim? Their aim, make you a Yahudi, make you a Nasrani, make you whatever else. And they will never ever be pleased except with that result. And so, for that reason, you see there are people present today who are trying to call to this taqreeb and wahdatul adyan and things like that. And they have certain statements. These are statements of kufr. The Shaykh gives some examples. He says, there's one person, he says, al-hurriya muqaddamatun ala shara. Freedom comes before shara, the legislation of Allah Azza wa Jal. Another one, he says, أنه يؤثر أو يؤثر الحرية على مجرد تطبيق الشريعة. One person, he prefers freedom, what they call freedom, hurriya, over the application of the Sharia of Allah Azza wa Jal. And from them is also, someone says, calling to the equality, الدعوة إلى المساواة بين جميع أتباع الديانات في الحقوق وأنه لا فرق بينهم. Calling to equality between all of the followers of all diyanat in rights, and there is no difference between them at all. Likewise, وَمِنْهَا الدَّعْوَةُ إِلَى حُرِّيَّةِ الْإِعْتِقَادِ. Likewise, the call to the freedom to choose belief. So, the Shaykh says this is what they are claiming. This is what they say, these people. They say that Islam has come to guarantee everybody all of this. And what is the answer in this ayah? Allah Azza wa Jal, He ordered the Prophet ﷺ, and He orders us as well to say, قُلْ إِنَّ هُدَى اللَّهِ هُوَ الْهُدَى. only the guidance of Allah is the true guidance. So this is what we say, the guidance of Allah, which is Islam, which is upon the Quran, this is the true guidance. And the Shaykh then says the guidance of Allah is what has come from in the book and upon the tongue of His Messenger sallallahu. And then he gave another warning. Then he warned again, if you were to follow their desires after knowledge has come to you, you will not have any wali or any nasir, any aider, helper from Allah Azza wa Jal. So this is a second ayah, Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 120. The third ayah that the Shaykh brings is in Surah Ali Imran, verse number 28. لا يتخذ المؤمنون, let not the believers take al-kafirina awliya'a min duni al-mu'minin. Let them not take the disbelievers as awliya, friends, protectors, besides the believers. وَمَنْ يَفْعَلْ ذَلِكَ فَلَيْسَ مِنَ اللَّهِ فِي شَيْءٍ إِلَّا أَن تَتَّقُوا مِنْهُمْ تُقَاهُ. So anyone who does that, then he has nothing to do with Allah, unless you fear something from them, unless it is out of a fear that you have from them. وَيُحَذِّرُكُمُ اللَّهُ نَفْسَهُ وَإِلَى اللَّهِ الْمَصِيرُ. And Allah cautions you from Himself, to Him shall you be returned. So this verse now, there's an exception in this verse, and so the Shaykh comments, he says that this verse describes the correct path that the people of Iman, pure Iman, should be upon, which is that they do not take any awliya from those who are besides the mu'mineen. لا يتخذ. This is a nahi, it's a prohibition. Let not the believers take as friends and protectors from those disbelievers besides the believers. The Shaykh then continues and he says that at the end of the verse he says, وَمَنْ يَفْعَلْ ذَلِكَ فَلَيْسَ مِنَ اللَّهِ فِي شَيْءٍ. This means Allahu bari'un minhu wa huwa bari'un kadhalik min Allah. That Allah is free from the likes of this person and he likewise is free of Allah. They have nothing to do with each other. And this person is not from the party of Allah, rather he's from the party of shaitan, even if he comes and he displays Iman and so on and so forth. Then he comes to this part, إِلَّا أَن تَتَّقُوا مِنْهُمْ تُقَاهُ. Unless you fear something from them. What does this mean, the Shaykh says? It means that if the Muslims, they fear some harm from the non-Muslims because they live in proximity, they share borders with each other, for example, or they live with them, and they do not have the ability to repel their harm, they don't have the means, don't have the ability, then in this situation it is permissible to display diplomacy, what we call diplomacy, al-mudarat is what we call it, which is basically to act diplomatically and with care with them, to to be nice to them, to please them, to do things which will ward off their evil, keep their evil away from you. This now is known as al-mudarat, and this is, the scholars say that it is permissible to do this when there is a need to do this. So basically, we do not harm them. We don't, we behave as we should behave without oppressing anybody, and so on and so forth. So this part is the exception which the scholars speak about. And then the Shaykh says at the end of the ayah there are two warnings. The first warning is وَيُحَذِّرُكُمُ اللَّهُ نَفْسَهُ. Allah warns you from Himself. Allah warns you from Himself. And the second warning is وَإِلَى اللَّهِ الْمَصِيرُ. To Allah shall you be returned. So these two warnings, the scholars explain, if you look at this verse, the first part of the verse prohibits you from taking awliya from the disbelievers. The second part of the verse makes an exception. It says, unless you fear from them some harm or something. Right? That makes an exception. But then there are two warnings after that. Allah warns you from Himself, and to Him shall you be returned. Which means that do not take this exception lightly. Don't play around with it. Don't use it now to fall into something which is unlawful, right? So after making the exception, he then gave 2 warnings for a Muslim to be careful and not to take this lightly. Because sometimes a person might use this and try to justify friendship, loyalty, and interactions which are not permissible, and then use this as an argument. So the Shaykh says that there are 2 warnings at the end of the ayah. So when the Shaykh finishes this discussion, he then says there is another issue. What is the hukm of at-ta'amul ma'al kufar? Hukmul mu'amala. So we discussed the same thing as what Shaykh Muhammad bin Abd discussed. And says, as for the religious aspect, we've discussed this already, to do with the deen. And we know that there is no mahabba or muwalat or nusra or things like that. So what is the answer to this issue about al-mu'amala? The Shaykh says there's no harm in this. There's no prohibition. La mani' min dhalik. If the Muslims, they are in need of at-tib, medicine, engineering, anything to do with pharmacy or things like this, and the disbelievers have this, then they are able to, the people of knowledge said, that this knowledge can be learned, this knowledge can be acquired and taken. And the Shaykh says there are many evidences of this in the texts. From them is the evidence that the Messenger ﷺ, he had taken a shield from a Yahudi, and in return he'd promised some food or some dates, and when he died, then Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, he fulfilled the actual debt that was due. Likewise, the Yahud of Khaybar, he made an agreement with them that they would cultivate the land, and then they would give a share of that to the Muslims and keep a share for themselves. And there are many other examples as well where the Messenger would use, for example, a mushrik in order to guide him on a journey and things of that nature. All of these are evidences to show that at-ta'amul is perfectly permissible between Muslims and non-Muslims. And then the Shaykh goes on to mention another issue, which is, what if there is a group of Muslims and a group of non-Muslims and they have a mithaq? So now there is a covenant or an agreement between the two of them, right? And the mithaq, this means that for the Muslims, they have to leave the non-Muslims, they have to leave them safe in their selves, in their children, in their honors, in their wealth, right? You can't violate the treaty or the covenant. They have to stick to the covenant. However, if there's a group from among the Muslims, so basically we have one group of Muslims, they have an agreement with the disbelievers. Then from this group, there's a group of Muslims who break and they attack non-Muslims, right? So the covenant between the Muslims and the non-Muslims. And a party comes, they break, and they fight against the non-Muslims who have an agreement with the Muslims. The Shaykh says now, it is upon the Imam of the Muslimin to restrain them and hold them back. Right? Because this now is violation of the contract, violation of treaties. And this, the Shaykh says, Naqd al-ahad min kaba'ir al-atham. It is from the greatest of sins. And then he mentions some hadith, Man qatala nafsan mu'ahadan lam yarih ra'ihat al-jannah wa inna rihaha la yujadu min masirati arba'ina aman. Whoever killed a soul that was under treaty, he will not smell the fragrance of paradise, even though the fragrance of paradise can be smelled from a distance of 40 years. So the Shaykh says, even if the Imam has to fight against those Muslims or kill those Muslims, even if it goes to that level, then he must do that in order to protect the covenant that had been made with the non-Muslims. So the Shaykh says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he ordered the people of Iman that they fulfill the covenant, the ahad. But if they begin fighting first, then the ahad is nullified, and then the Muslims can fight. Right? So these are some of the rulings to do with the issue of treaties, covenants, loyalty, disloyalty, and this brings us to an end of this particular discussion. So, to finish the discussion, we distinguish between, the scholars, they distinguish between al-mu'amala, which is dealings between people, and so that's why you see Muslim countries. In fact, Shaykh Muhammad Aman, he mentioned that today you see that because industry has developed in the West, in non-Muslim countries, Muslims, they are in need of industries and technology and things like that. So it's a necessity that they interact in terms of trade. So these kind of interactions are totally permissible. And this is from where we see the ignorance of the Khawarij, and the Takfiriyin, and the Jahl in the religion, because they say that because there are contracts and agreements, and because you see Muslim rulers visiting non-Muslim rulers and vice versa, and there are trade relations and they're giving gifts and things like this, all of this is from their jahl of the religion. And so they use these issues like this to basically make takfir of the rulers and then call to the khuruj. So this is mu'amala. And then there is, which is permissible. And then there is at-tawalli. This is where now a person has love, loyalty in the heart, and then he aids and supports, and he wants the non-Muslims to dominate and, harm the Muslims. He wants it in his heart. This is clear disbelief outside the fold of Islam. And then there is a third situation where Muslims, they are allowed to act with diplomacy because there is a harm or a threat or a danger. Right? This could be, for example, neighboring countries, and there's a strong presence and there's a threat. And so the Muslims can act with diplomacy to ward off that evil, and they can show mudarat and things like this. This is something that's by necessity. It's permissible to resort to that. And then there's also another one, fourth one, where you make muwalat on the issue of, for a worldly reason. Right? This is like a major sin. You're trying to look for some benefit on account of a worldly reason, and you support the disbelievers on that issue. So an example of this is the companion Hatib bin Abi Balta'a radiallahu anhu. He had some relatives in Mecca, and what he did was, the Messenger of Allah was planning to in one of the battles. So he sent a letter containing information about what the Messenger of Allah was going to do. Right? The reason why he did this was he wanted to please those Kufar of Quraysh, so that they leave his family and his possessions, which were in Mecca, that they leave them alone. Right? So this was for a worldly reason. And he didn't do it because he wanted the disbelievers to dominate and to be victorious. Right? He was trying to win a favor with them. So the scholars discussed this issue, and they explained that this is actually a sin. It's a major sin to do this, but it is not disbelief. Right? So these are 3 or 4 different situations. There's ta'amul, there's tawalli, there's muwalat, there's mudarat. Right? When there's some reason to fear. So we distinguish between all of these different issues, and the evidences are very clear in the Quran and in the Sunnah. Now what you see, the Khawarij, these people, what they do is they go back to these books, they go back to Nawaqid al-Islam, and they'll go back to al-Usul al-Thalatha, and they think that they've understood the maqsood. Right? These takfiris like Abu Qatada, what's his name? What's the name of that Jordanian? What's he called? I've forgotten his name now, subhanAllah. He's, I've forgotten his name now, subhanAllah. Isam Barqawi. Abu Muhammad al-Maqdisi. This man is an evil shaitan, this Abu Muhammad al-Maqdisi. This man, he claims that I've gone to the books of the scholars of Tawheed, I've read their books and everything, and he claims that he's understood everything, right? And all of these scholars like Shaykh al-Fawzan, whatever, they've just, they've all deviated away from the way of Shaykh Muhammad bin Abd al-Wahhab, right? So these people, when you go back to the scholars, and you see that those books that were written, they were written because of special circumstances that were present in that time. To give an example, this is a piece of text from Shaykh Abdullah bin Abdul Aziz al-Anqari rahimahullah. The two scholars who wrote books on this topic, right? Basically on muwalat and tawalli. And they basically wrote and they said that whoever aids and supports the disbelievers against Muslims is a disbeliever, right? So these people, they take these books and then they apply them to the situation that you see today, right? So if you look and you go back and you read what is being said here, this Shaykh, he's now refuting some of the Khawarij who were using these two books of these two scholars, right? There's two scholars, Shaykh Sulaiman bin Abdullah al-Shaykh, he's one of the offspring of Shaykh Muhammad bin Abd, Shaykh Muhammad bin Abd, right? Both of them, they wrote two books speaking about this topic, at-tawalli wal-muwalat, and making takfir of the one who, whatever. So the Shaykh says, وَقَدْ بَلَغْنَا أن الذي أشكل عليكم أن مجرد مخالطة الكفار ومعاملتهم بمصالحة ونحوها وقدومهم على ولي الأمر لأجل ذلك أنها هي موالاة المشركين المنهي عنها في الآيات والأحاديث. So basically there's some group of people, they're trying to understand these verses and they're saying that just to mix with the non-Muslims and to have trade dealings with them, to have treaties with them, right? All of this, and to come to them and so forth, this is muwalat of the mushrikeen, right? This is what's prohibited in the hadith and the ayat. And then he says, وَرُبَّمَا فَهِمْتُمْ ذَلِكَ مِنَ الدَّلَائِلِ التي صنف الشيخ سليمان بن عبد الله بن الشيخ ومن سبيل النجاة للشيخ محمد بن عتيق. So he says, maybe you understood this from these books that you've been reading, that you think you've understood, but you haven't, right? And he says, فَأَوَّلًا, and then he explains what the background is. He says, فَأَوَّلًا نُبَيِّنُ لَكُمْ سبب تصنيف الدلائل فإن الشيخ سليمان صنفها لما هجمت العساكر التركية على نجد في وقته. He says, first of all, the first book, Ad-Dalail, Shaykh Suleiman, he wrote this book when the Turkish forces, they invaded Najd. They came to Najd and they invaded Najd. وأرادوا اجتثاث الدين من أصله وساعدهم جماعة من أهل النجد من البادية والحاضرة وأحبوا ظهورهم. So when they came, they wanted to come to basically uproot this Tawheed. They wanted to abolish this deen of Tawheed. That's why they came, right? And then what happened is there was a group of people in Najd who then allied with them and supported them and aided them from the Bedouins and other people, and they wanted those Turkish forces to be victorious over the people of Tawheed. That's why Shaykh Suleiman wrote that book. That's the situation there, yeah? وكذلك سبب تصنيف الشيخ محمد بن عتيق سبيل النجاة هو لما هاجمت العساكر التركية على بلاد المسلمين وساعدهم من ساعدهم حتى so he says the reason for the authorship of Shaykh Muhammad bin Abd, which is the second book called Sabil al-Najah, this is likewise when the Turkish forces invaded the land of the Muslims, and whoever aided them until those Turkish forces took over many parts of Najd. So he says, فَمَعْرِفَةْ سَبَبْ التصنيف مما يعين على فهم كلام العلماء فإنه بحمد الله ظاهر المعنى فإن المراد به موافقة الكفار على كفرهم وإظهار مودتهم ومعاونتهم على المسلمين وتحسين أفعالهم وإظهار الطاعة والانقياد لهم على كفرهم. To the end of what he said. So he says, so he's basically saying that you have to understand, why did someone write this book? What's the reason behind writing this book? and you will then understand the kalam of the ulama. And he says, for indeed it is very clear. What they have written is very clear. What they are speaking of is that if you agree with the kuffar ala kufrihim, right? So those Bedouins agreed with the Turkish forces upon their disbelief of shirk and whatever they were upon. Sufism, worshipping, saints and things like that. They were in agreement. So they supported them for that, and they fought against the people of Tawheed. So he says, وَإِنَّ الْمُرَادْ بِهِ مُوَافَقَةَ الْكُفَّارِ عَلَى كُفْرِهِمْ وَإِظْهَارِ مَوَدَّتِهِمْ. And then to make open your love of them and your affection towards them, to make it open. And then to aid and support them against the Muslimin. And then to consider their actions to be good. Their action of fighting and killing the people of Tawheed, to consider that to be good. And to obey them and to comply with them upon their kufr. وَالْإِنْقِيَادِ لَهُمْ عَلَى كُفْرِهِمْ. Right? So this now is, now you see from this, the people like these Khawarij, Abu Muhammad al-Maqdisi and all these people, and they say, I studied ad-Durar as-Saniyya for 5-10 years, and I understood everything, and these scholars now, they've abandoned the way. This is from his jahl, and he's just become amazed with himself, and this is what happens when you don't go back to the scholars and learn the books and the texts from them. So this topic is very, very important for us to understand, and these are very emotional issues. It's very easy to get a following just by shouting and screaming against the rulers. This one, he gave a gift to this president. This is muwalat, and people are ignorant, they don't know, and they think, yes, this is correct, this is evil, right? So it's important for us to understand these issues and to explain them to people as well, because of ignorance in these issues, these Khawarij, they are allowed to basically call to their falsehood. So inshallah, we'll stop the lesson there at this point. This is Naqd number 8. In the next lesson, inshallah ta'ala, we'll discuss Naqd number 9. Whoever believes that a person is allowed to, he doesn't have to abide by the Sharia, then this is another Naqd. So we'll look at that next week, inshallah ta'ala. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.